We look at the table. Brazil now fourth. Remember, the top six go to the World Cup, seventh into the Intercontinental Playoff. Brazil now behind only Uruguay, Colombia, and defending World Cup and Copa America champions, Argentina. All right, for more on Brazil, we welcome in our Brazil correspondent, Gustavo Hofman. Not because he's in Brazil, he's in Madrid, but because Brazil is in him. Gustavo, great to have you back with us on Futbol Americas. Brazil's winning. The Bills won on Monday Night Football, my man. I know everybody's very happy in the Hofman household.
Yeah, we're in a good mood. We are on a good mood. Thank you, Seb. It's always a pleasure to be here. Well, for Brazil, the most important thing was to win both matches, to add 6 points. Because Brazil was in a very bad situation. We're not only talking about football, we're talking about the table. Now Brazil is in the fourth position. Brazil will qualify for the World Cup. So the most important thing was to win both matches and add 6 points. Against Chile, it was not with a good performance. Against Peru, we had the best combination, the result and a good performance. From now on, I think that Brazil must improve. The improvement is like obligatory for Brazil, because when we talk about the favorites for the next World Cup, we can talk about Brazil because of the history, because of the quality of their players, but we cannot talk about Brazil as a favorite for the next World Cup because of the collectively, because of the team of Brazil. So I think that the next two matches against Venezuela and Uruguay, we have to see improvement from this Brazilian team, including because of the return of some key players like Vinicius Junior and probably Neymar.
Since you mentioned Vinicius Junior, let's just go there for a minute, okay? Because this is a guy who doesn't play in either of these games, and Brazil gets 6 points after they've been struggling with him in the lineup. So obviously, some people out there, surely the more cynical folks, will say, is Brazil maybe, at least in the short term, better off with Vinicius Junior out of the lineup? What do you say to that? Is there any truth to it? Or is the reality here just, Gustavo, that they played Chile and Peru, who were last and next to last coming into this window?
This is so important to talk about. Brazil played against the two worst teams in South American qualifying. For me, it's crazy. It's crazy to think about the Brazilian national team nowadays without Vinicius. Vinicius will probably win the Ballon d'Or in some weeks. So the problem is not the player. The problem is with the coach. The coach has to find the solution to adapt Vinicius to the team, to adapt the team to Vinicius, to have the best of Vinicius as he plays for Real Madrid. So Vinicius will return and will be a starter for Brazil. Maybe if Rodrigo, who played on the left flank in both matches, if Rodrigo had played well and that was not the case, maybe people would talk a little bit more about this, about Brazil being better without Vinicius, but it was not the case. Individually, we had Savinho playing very well on the right flank, Rafinha, for me the best player of Brazil in both matches, playing as an attacking midfielder in the 4-2-3-1 formation, and as a protagonist of Brazil, the main player of Brazil, Luis Henrique coming from the bench, the player who was an ex-Betis player and now Botafogo player. He played also very well. So I think that maybe, as I said, if Rodrigo had played very well, maybe it would be a topic for Brazil, but I don't think so. I really don't think so. And Dorival Jr. knows that. He knows that he must count with Vinicius.
You mentioned guys coming back. You mentioned Vinicius. You also, I have to note, mentioned Neymar, who we do know is now back on the practice field with his club team. So let's talk about Neymar for a second, because every time you mention him, and you're not the only one, but you've talked about it before here on Futbol Americas, that Brazil need Neymar back in the lineup. It's not necessarily, Gustavo, that I roll my eyes, but I think, man, at 32 years old, coming off a very serious injury, a year removed from playing, a year and a half removed from playing at the top level, is Neymar really the solution to Brazil's problems? Especially when, and you know we got La Liga here on ESPN, we cover a lot of Barcelona. We see what Rafinha can do at the club level. Then we see what he did against Peru with the 2 penalties, the 2 goals there. Has Rafinha at all convinced you that maybe he is the guy for that role and that maybe Brazil don't need Neymar back as much as you would have thought in the past?
I don't think that Brazil must be dependent on Neymar. Neymar must be one player more, but he's still a star for Brazil. He's still a star for the Brazilian people and for Dorival. He's 32 years old. He's coming back from a serious injury. He doesn't play for more than a year. So you cannot, like 2 years ago in Brazil, the main topic and the critics were, we have the Neymar dependence. Then we won a Copa America without Neymar. I think that the team got better sometimes without Neymar. I think that now Brazil must count with Neymar, but not depend on Neymar. We have to be stronger as a team and don't depend exclusively with one player. The same thing about Vinicius. We must have Vinicius, the best of Vinicius, as a team. And then we can have the best of Vinicius individually. With Neymar, it should be the same way. About Rafinha, when we talk about tactics, the position where Rafinha is playing now is the position where Neymar must play as an attacking midfielder behind the center forward. Then, if you move Neymar to the starting lineup, you could move Rafinha to the right flank, where he also can play very well. But then you would sack Savinho. Then you wouldn't also have a spot for Rodrigo. So Brazil still has many options for the forwards. Let's see what happens with Neymar. We always say in Brazil that, okay, we are talking about Neymar, but first of all, we have to wait the return. When he returns and when we see how Neymar is, we can really talk about Neymar in the national team. But for sure, it will happen.
Because it's Brazil, Gustavo, obviously there's such a focus on the attack. There's such a focus on that position, right? The number 10. But it's pretty clear when we watch this team, there are a lot of issues, right? If Brazil wants to be, as you say, a favorite, a true contender for the World Cup in 2026, there are a lot of things that are not at that standard right now for this Brazilian national team. So as you look across the board and you take the number 10 role off the table, what for you right now, thinking about 2026, is the biggest worry about this Brazilian national team?
Fullbacks, both fullbacks on the right and on the left. And it was also an issue during the World Cup in 2022. I remember to make some ESPN FC, some shows on ESPN, and we talk about it with Shaka Hislop, with some colleagues, about the problem of Brazil on both fullbacks. Against Chile, Brazil had Danilo, a very experienced player who's playing as a center in Juventus in the bench. He's not a starter for Juventus this season. He was the right fullback starter. On the next match was Wanderson, a very young player from Monaco. On the left, Abner played his first 2 matches for Brazil. We also have Caio Henrique, who wasn't called up for this match. Guilherme Arana, player from Atlético Mineiro, was at the bench in both matches. So you see that the names are not names that we normally talk about the best players in the world as we talk about the forwards. I think that both fullbacks now is an issue for Brazil, and Dorival must find a solution. And the solution is to find the best player who fits for the team as his tactical idea.
I'm shocked, given everything you've said on this show, that you didn't say that the biggest worry for Brazil moving forward is the manager, Dorival. Tell me about that. These 6 points, these 2 wins, have they taken the pressure off of Dorival, or how much of the pressure have they relieved?
Yeah, a little bit for sure, because 2 wins, 6 points, it was what Brazil needed. But I never thought actually that Dorival was the best solution, the best manager to replace Tite, actually, because Brazil, as we know, Brazil lost one entire year waiting for Carlo Ancelotti. The dream of Carlo Ancelotti, 1 year waiting for him and nothing. Then Brazil lost this year. It was probably the worst year in the history of the Brazilian national team, 2023. Then the president of the Brazilian Federation, who wants to do everything by himself, he doesn't hear anyone, he decided that it would be Dorival. For me, the best solution would have been Abel Ferreira, the Portuguese manager for Palmeiras, who has won many trophies over the last years. But I think that Dorival now, he has the confidence from the president. the pressure over him is lower, but you know how things work. If Brazil doesn't beat Venezuela, if Brazil doesn't beat Uruguay, everything will come back. So that's why I started saying that the most important thing now was 6 points. Okay, they got it, 6 points. So the pressure is lower. Now, improvement. Brazil must win both matches and must play much better, must show improvement. If that doesn't happen, for sure the pressure will come up again.
Brazil right now, 4th in the CONMEBOL table after a couple wins in South American World Cup qualifying, as Gustavo mentioned there. Venezuela and Uruguay next up in the November international window. Gustavo Hofman, as always, great to have you with us here on Futbol Americas. Thanks for the time.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.